Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to a special housing report where we look at the figures on the housing market in New Zealand and various views from people from the last week or so. And there's been quite a bit of fresh data through on what's happening in the housing market, even though things are starting to quieten down for the winter. We've seen figures from the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand, which is all the real estate agents, and they report their sales figures. We've also seen figures from QV, quotable value. They look at property values as opposed to just prices. We've seen Barfoot and Thompson, the Auckland estate agency group, release their figures. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand has also given its view on what's happening with the housing market. And BNZ and the REINZ have released their survey of what real estate agents think of the market. So we've got a pretty good view from the last week on what's going on in the housing market. And it's a slightly mixed picture, it has to be said. The BNZ REINZ survey of real estate agents shows that a net 64% said in April that prices were rising, house prices were rising. Now you may say, well, real estate agents are always going to tell you that house prices are rising. Actually, that's not true. When you look at the survey results from last month, just a net 25% said that house prices were rising. And when you look at the same survey from a year ago, back then, a net 7% saw house prices falling. So they're a pretty accurate measure of what they think is happening in the housing market. And now a record high 64% say that house prices are rising. It's worth having a look at just how out of line that is by looking at this chart. You can see here that this is how real estate agents view house prices. And on the whole, for the last wee while, they've seen prices rising, but something really took off in April and certainly May. There was a big increase in the first couple of weeks of May in the percentage of agents who saw house prices falling. So it seems that supply, particularly in some of the hot markets, Auckland and Christchurch, is still tight. This survey showed a relatively few new number of listings. And when you look across the market, you can see that in Auckland, particularly the central suburbs of Auckland, and in Christchurch, there's a lack of supply because of leaky buildings and the earthquake, and relatively strong demand from migration, people coming back home, New Zealanders, and of course Auckland being the centre for most migrants, and of course the lack of supply in Auckland because of the leaky building problem. Now, Tony Alexander from BNZ cites this survey with the REINZ in saying that even though prices are rising, there's no signs of a boom and no signs of panic buying yet. And that was certainly the view of the Reserve Bank when it released its financial stability report this week. The BNZ and the REINZ also pointed out that buyers were seen as only marginally more motivated than sellers. And even though there were some first-time property buyers and property investors rejoining the market, it wasn't over the top. Now, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand said on Wednesday that even though prices were rising, it didn't see the momentum growing for any sort of 2002 to 2007 style boom. It said that lending growth remained weak and households were already quite indebted and didn't want to get into even more debt. The Reserve Bank also pointed to an increase in the construction of new dwellings, which will help increase the supply onto the market. And when asked about some of these signs of hot markets and hot prices, certainly in central Auckland, the Reserve Bank governor brushed that aside and said that these were more than just a few headlines. Essentially, he doesn't expect this price heat in central Auckland and Christchurch to spread to the rest of the country. But what do the actual surveys show? Because we got the REINZ figures out on Tuesday, and volumes there in April were actually down 4.1% on a seasonally adjusted basis in April from May. So that suggests maybe no boom. However, there were some complications with holidays in April versus May. This year we had a big long Easter and Anzac Day during a work day. And when you look at what's happening with the median price, it's actually down a little bit, although volumes are up 16%. The stratified price, the REINZ measures, which takes out some of the volatility, up 2.7%. So that would suggest prices are rising, but not particularly quickly. Auckland prices, though, rising 4.6%. And obviously there's something different going on in Auckland. The QV report on prices showed that there was a gentle rise starting to happen and pointed to prices up 3.1% from a year ago. Auckland prices up 5%. And when you look at the Barfoot sales figures for Auckland, they also showed a slower April and a patchy result, Prices were up quite strongly in the central suburbs, but not in some of the other areas. So the big question, will it spread? The Reserve Bank says no. The real estate agents, according to the survey, say probably not. But I wonder, it did last time we saw this sort of heat generated in the market. It radiated out through the rest of the country. And this time around, there are a few things different though. Unemployment is high and rising. Migration, we're not seeing the same surge in migration we saw between 2002 and 2007. However, on the side of the argument that says we are going to see it spread out and the boom may develop, lending standards have really eased off from the banks in the last few months. And this week we saw ANZ and National Bank cut their interest rates. That's one way to get the market going. Just to finally have a look at what's happening with lending standards, this chart here shows you the net percentage of credit officers who see an easing in standards. The blue line is what actually happened in the March quarter, and the red point here is what people think the standards officers at the banks will happen in the next quarter. There's been a significant easing of lending standards. So this is 90% plus home loans, large multiples to income of lending, and there's a massive easing of lending standards expected now according to the Reserve Bank measures of lending standards by the banks. So it is a time though to approach your bank and tell them to cut your rate or give you a better deal, because they're competing hard and they're dropping their pants, so to speak, with lending standards. I'm Bernard Hickey. That was a special housing report from interest.co.nz.